And we're back. Obviously, the gas crisis has been on everyone's lips for the last year. And as you could see in that graph that we just showed, gas prices have been incredibly volatile. The COVID recovery, combined with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and many other conditions, have created a perfect storm that has led to high demand, shortage of supply, to put it simply. In late August, after Russia announced it would shut down the Nord Stream 1 pipeline for repairs, gas prices at the Dutch TTF trading point, the European benchmark, reached 339 euros per megawatt hour. This was 140% higher than the week before, and an 848 increase in prices in August last year, where they sat at around 40 euros megawatt per hour. As a result, end users' gas bills are rising exponentially. Living standards are dropping. Energy providers are having to be bailed out, and governments are also feeling the heat. How can we remove ourselves from this vicious cycle? That's what we're here to find out in this panel. And today we have Jan Rosenow, who is the Director of European Programs at the Regulatory Assistance Project, or RAP. He's an honorary research associate of the Energy Program of the Environmental Change Institute at the University of Oxford, a board member of the European Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, steering committee member for the Coalition for Energy Services, an associate fellow of the Science Policy Research Institute, a co-host of the Foresight Climate and Energy podcast, among other things, and a LinkedIn Top Voice. Thank you so much for joining us, Jan. We're very excited to have your insights here today.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the discussion.
As am I. We also have Maryna Hritsyshyna. Has more than 10 years experience in the energy sector and specializes in hydrogen regulation, renewable energy projects, and energy markets. Maryna focuses on the regulatory issues of hydrogen, certification schemes for hydrogen and renewables, electricity and gas markets, and legal regulation of new tech in the energy sector. She's currently a senior manager of regulatory affairs at Hydrogen LOHC, a company that uses liquid organic hydrogen carrier technology for superior flexible hydrogen supply to consumers in industry and mobility across the globe. Maryna, pleasure to have you here today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for invitation on this webinar and for introduction.
My pleasure. We are also joined by Lucy Yu, who is the CEO at Octopus Energy Centre for Net Zero, a research unit leading pioneering research to make the future energy system a reality. Lucy has nearly 2 decades of experience building tech ventures and developing tech policy and regulation for the UK government, European Commission, and the UN. She's led operations, commercial, policy, and research functions for several high-growth, globally renowned tech startups, including 2 unicorns. Lucy has been named a Financial Times Top 100 Most Influential BAME Leader in Tech in 2019, and one of Diversity UK's Top 100 Asian Stars in UK Tech in 2021. Lucy, welcome.
Thanks, Greta. Thanks for inviting me.
And finally, we have Christian Rellensmann, who is a product manager for heat pumps at Thermondo and was responsible for the entire product launch and scaling of their heat pump offering. Thermondo is Germany's leading heating installer for family houses. They make a simple and fast switch to efficient household energy possible, including advice on government funding and support in applying for it. The company has already changed 3,000 heating systems in Germany. Christian, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward for the discussion.
Great. Well, what an incredible room that we have here and a very important discussion. So let's dive straight into the questions. Lucy, how can we incentivize households to reduce gas consumption without hitting the vulnerable?
Well, great question. So I will talk a little bit about heat pumps, actually. So obviously, heat pumps use electricity, not gas. However, some of our electricity, is generated from gas. Therefore, one of the things we can do to help incentivize households to use less gas is firstly move them away from fossil fuel-based heating systems. So move them away from those gas boilers, other fossil fuel systems, over to the likes of electric heat pumps. But then we can have, if you like, an additional win, which is to use those heat pumps in a flexible way. So what I'm talking about there is maybe reducing or shifting the times at which those heat pumps use electricity, in order to take advantage of times which are lower cost, but also lower carbon on the grid. Now, this will save those individual householders money, but it can also benefit the system overall. So this kind of behavior can be advantageous at the aggregate, at the grid level. And that's something that therefore can actually benefit everybody. So it can also benefit those vulnerable customers, the less wealthy households that are also consumers within the energy system, because it can reduce overall system costs. So this is about reducing the need to build extra grid infrastructure through the deployment of flexibility at the household level, but also potentially reducing the costs of constraints when that applies. So both of those things mean that we can reduce the costs to the system overall, and that can reduce the cost for everybody. So not just those particular households that I'm talking about, but everybody who's participating in the energy system.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Some great insights there. And Jan, this is quite a big question, but how have different countries responded to the gas crisis? And what do you think has been most effective and what not?
Thank you, Greta. I would like to distinguish perhaps between two different types of measures that have been taken. First of all, there are measures which were taken to ease the pressure of the high prices on consumers and businesses. But then we've also seen measures that were targeting gas demand reduction. Maybe let me start with the measures taken so far to reduce gas demand. And I'm going to share some good news that have just come out for the October data on gas demand. Bruegel, which is a European energy think tank, estimate that this year so far gas demand is down about 10% compared to the average for the same period in 2019 to 2021. And in October, 25% reduction compared to previous years, which is pretty remarkable. So why is that? Well, in the summer months, a lot of the reduction was driven by industry, and this is mainly a result of fuel switching, unfortunately, mainly to oil and other fossil fuels. In October, the main reduction driver has been household demand, and a lot of that is driven by warmer weather. So we're quite lucky in Europe as well as in the UK to have warm weather, which in turn then results in lower gas demand. When you drill down further into the data, you will see some big differences, though, between countries. For example, Finland, more than 50% gas demand reduction in 2022 so far. Slovakia shows a 4% increase. So there's huge differences between countries, and they're not all the same by any means. So what are countries doing in response to the gas crisis in the sort of short term to reduce gas demand? One thing that we have seen are efforts to drive energy savings. For example, in France, Spain, Germany, we've seen mandates to save energy in public and commercial buildings. You may remember some of the headlines around sort of maximum temperatures for air conditioning or for space heating as well. In the UK, where I live, nothing has been done at all on the demand side, which is very disappointing. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit more later on. But so far, there has not been any significant engagement by the UK government on reducing gas demand, which I think is a big mistake. The second type of measures that I mentioned is public spending commitments to effectively subsidize energy bills. You all probably know about the UK promise to keep energy bills below, on average, £2,500 per year for households. And initially, those proposals were costed at perhaps as much as £150 billion. But that has come down now because gas demand is lower because of warm weather, but also we have lower energy prices generally in Europe. And the commitment is now ending after 6 months rather than 2 years as initially proposed. Similar announcements were made in other countries across Europe, Germany, Austria, other EU governments. And the FT in September calculated that it's about £450 billion of public spending to subsidize energy bills. I could go into a lot more detail, but I don't think I have the time to do that, to explain how different countries have structured those measures. They are quite different, with some offering a kind of subsidy of the unit price of energy, and others offering support of a certain amount of energy use, but then leaving the remainder exposed to market prices. Perhaps, again, we can touch on that later on in the discussion. I think I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. A really holistic overview of different countries' responses. Really interesting. A lot to unpack, which I'm sure we will in the next hour. Lucy, I believe you had a follow-up point to something that Jan mentioned.
I did, yes. So Jan is correct that in the UK we haven't had a national campaign around the demand side and reducing demand there. We obviously have seen that in some other countries over the course of the year. I thought it was worth mentioning some things that have been industry-led that we have seen. So last year, Octopus Energy, the company my company is part of the Octopus Energy group. Last year, they ran something called the Big Dirty Turndown. Now, what this did was identify 8 specific event windows, and customers who participated in the Big Dirty Turndown were told about those event windows in advance by an email, so 24 hours in advance. And they were offered incentives to reduce their energy consumption during those event windows. And this was measured through the half-hourly smart meter data. There were 2 forms of incentives that were offered to customers. And that trial involved over 100,000 households participated. That proved a general concept, which was that people would reduce their energy consumption, and they would reduce so meaningfully in exchange for an incentive. What has just recently commenced now in the UK, which is also industry-led, so this is a partnership between different energy retailers, including Octopus Energy again, and some of the other retailers in the UK and National Grid ESO, is the launch of something called a demand flexibility service. So this started very recently, just in the past week. This is again a service which at specific times, those who are participating will be asked to turn down or to reduce their demand. For this particular trial, which is Octopus has called it saving sessions, customers will be paid £3 per kilowatt hour of turn down. And just to put that into perspective, under the current price cap that is in effect in the UK at the moment, the price per kilowatt hour for electricity is around 34 pence. So it's sort of about nine times the price for consumption that will be paid for every kilowatt hour of reduction. So just thought I would mention that because I think it's relevant to the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Lucy. Jan, did you want to respond to that, or should we continue with the discussion?
Very happy to. I mean, I think, yeah, I'm a big supporter of that trial. I think it's great National Grid is doing that, and companies like Octopus are collaborating with National Grid on that. I always felt demand side response is overlooked in the UK, but also in other countries in Europe. Certainly when it comes to residential customers, we've done a lot with large industrial customers for years. It's not a new concept, but now we have all these electric vehicles and heat pumps coming to market. There's like a tremendous opportunity to use that as a resource to integrate more renewables, to lower gas consumption at peak times. So I'm a big supporter of those efforts. But as Lucy says, they are industry driven. And I believe that the government could be doing an awful lot more to actually stimulate the demand side and make sure it's playing its part in this transition.
Thanks, Jan. Maryna, what are your thoughts on this, particularly in terms of how can we reduce dependency on Russian gas and gas in general, looking at regulation and beyond?
Thank you for this very interesting question. I think the answer on this question we can find in 3 main regulatory initiatives that we discuss in this year. First of all, it's REPowerEU, proposal to Renewable Energy Directive and hydrogen package. Regarding REPowerEU, that was initiated in order to reduce dependency from Russian natural gas. It contains certain measures that can help us to reduce the dependency from natural gas through energy efficiency, in particular through separate targets for that will be increased in the energy efficiency sector. Secondly, it also includes the diversity of supply of natural gas through development of LNG terminals in the EU. And according to the last numbers, we expect approximately 20 new LNG terminals that can cover next year 50% of Russian natural gas. And the next very important initiatives, it's an acceleration of renewable energy development and also production of renewable hydrogen. And not only production, but also we have the targets for production, domestic production in the EU, 10 million tons of hydrogen by 2030, but also import of hydrogen in the same amounts by the same time. Additionally to REPowerEU, we have also amendments to the Renewable Energy Directive, and I would like to emphasize that in September, the European Parliament adopted amendments to this directive that is now in trial process. But it's interesting that in this directive, it was mentioned also this problem regarding natural gas and Russian invasion in Ukraine. And in order to solve this problem, it was proposed to, first of all, it was mentioned that Russia provides more than 50% of the EU total gas consumption, which is mostly used in the building sector, which is responsible for 40% of the EU's total energy consumption. And one of the possible solutions for this situation is the development of solar rooftops and heat pumps in the EU. So it's additional confirmation that through such regulations, we are looking for solutions, the problems with dependency together with the natural gas from Russia. But if we consider in general the refuse from natural gas in order to decarbonize our economy and energy, we need to take into account also hydrogen package that includes the development of low carbon gases and renewable gases. According to this package, we plan to replace natural gas by hydrogen. And in general, according to the global tendencies that we can see, according to the, for instance, World Energy Outlook that was published by International Energy Agency, the global low carbon hydrogen rises and the production of this low carbon hydrogen rises, and we expect the growth of this production in order to decrease CO2 emissions. So I hope that I have answered on your question, but it's a very complex topic, and we have a lot of initiatives regarding this problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a multifaceted approach, as you really got across just then. And I definitely want to ask more about hydrogen, but you also mentioned heat pumps. So I just want to ask Christian, what are the major challenges and opportunities around the electrification of heating, and how can we increase the adoption of heat pumps?
This topic, I can say that I'm not an expert in heat pumps, but according to the general discussion, I can support the general position that it's important to have certain support for development of heat pumps in the EU. And one of the questions that is also raised in this discussion, it's also important to take into account electricity sector, because in case of reaching our goals, we will need also to be sure that our electricity infrastructure complies to new demands.
Absolutely, thank you. Christian, what's your perspective on the question?
Yes, thank you. I think when you think of the decarbonization of the heating sector, it's easy to get frustrated or to see it as a goal which is too big to reach this goal. So I think what's really helpful is to concentrate on the easy points right now. And I think the installation of heat pumps in 1 or 2 family homes is one of these points where we have every solution in place. We have the technology, we know the customers, and we just have to find a way to install these heat pumps. So that's why we as Thermondo are focusing on this market, and we have the goal on the German level to install 6 million heat pumps until 2030, and on the European level of 60 million heat pumps. And I think that's a very ambitious goal, but it's feasible in the end. And we have certain challenges to go beyond to make this happen, but these challenges are feasible, in my opinion. And I would like to dive into some of these to give everyone a feeling of what challenges a heating installer in Europe has to tackle to make this transition to renewable energies in the energy market happen. So from a technical perspective, we see that the installation of heat pumps require process changes, and even the planning and thinking about the exchange of a heating system is very much different for a heat pump compared to a fossil-based boiler. So when you install a fossil-based boiler, you have basically one visit at the customer. You go there, you deinstall or remove the old boiler and install the new one, and that's it. And you have qualified installers who can do this work, and they have been trained with training material which exists since 30 or 40 years, and that's our processes which are good trained, and they can be done easily. So when you think of heat pump installations, you have the difficulty that you need other you have to do other work. You have to build a foundation in the garden of the customer to install a heat pump. You have to have an electrician who makes the electrician part of the heat pump connection happen. And even the planning of the heat pump is very much different compared to a conventional boiler. So we think that the labor shortage and the qualification of our existing installers is a very, very important topic into reaching this goal of installing so much heat pumps in Germany and in Europe. And to do this, I don't think there is an easy way. We just have to find a way to qualify all of these installers, and we see it as a topic where we have to start really at the beginning. I talked to installers at Thermondo who did their qualifications some years ago, and the heat pump was a topic which was maybe discussed for 8 hours in a program which went for 3 years. So this is not an important topic in the qualifications of heating system installers. So we have to make it a bigger topic, and to allow these installers to install heat pumps from now on. That's one side, and the technical challenges and the qualification of our labor. Another one is the supply of heat pumps. So at the moment, I don't think we have a demand problem of heat pumps. We have a lot of demand in Germany. The heat pump, everyone is talking about the heat pump. But what we have is a shortage of heat pumps. So we as Thermondo, we are in a very fortunate situation that we have enough heat pumps to install. But when you look at, for example, German or European manufacturers, we see that many installers are waiting 4 to 6 months to get a heat pump to install, and that's a very it's unfortunate for the installer as well as for the end customer who has to wait 6 months until his new heating system arrives. And that's a very bad experience when you turn on the heater now when it's a little bit colder outside and you notice it doesn't work, and then you want to switch for a heat pump and you're willing to spend extra money maybe to make the switch, but you cannot because we don't have the supply of heat pumps. So I think that's a topic we have to, or the suppliers have to solve during the next years, but I'm optimistic that we can make this transition a little bit of time. Yeah, it's very difficult to make it just in a second, but time we will manage to be there. And maybe a fourth topic to cover is the regulations part and the processes. We have for heat pumps other regulation topics. We have think about, for example, noise emissions and the registration with the power grid operator. And we need very high level of efficiency in these processes to make the installation of 6 million heat pumps happen. And right now, especially in Germany, we are very manual. We are doing this in the same way like we did it in the last 30 years. And in this regulation and bureaucratic processes, we just need to accelerate these and to digitize these. And when we can tackle these challenges, I'm quite optimistic that we can reach this goal of 6 or 60 million heat pumps in Europe.
Thank you so much, Christian. Quite a few challenges there that we need to overcome. But as you said, I think it's really important to have ambitious targets. And I know a few of the other speakers want to talk about heat pumps as well. It's quite a hot topic, if you don't mind the pun. But first of all, I would just like to share a graphic in the new Repower EU plan, which is aimed at reducing European reliance on Russian gas. The EU wants to double the current rate of heat pumps over the next 5 years to reach 60 million heat pumps by 2030. Jan, do you think this is feasible, and what do we need to change to reach these goals?
It's a great question. And I just wanted to build on what Christian has said. I think what has really changed is that in recent years, there's an increasing recognition that heat pumps are a key technology in the heating sector. For a long time, there was a debate about a variety of, could it be biomass, could it be biogas, could it be hydrogen, is it heat pumps, is it district heating? And I think now there's more and more agreement that heat pumps isn't going to be 100%, but it's going to be a very large chunk of the heat demand. And I say that because the IEA, for example, foresees that the majority of heating systems installed in 2050 will be heat pumps. The IPCC comes to similar conclusions, and also McKinsey and other organizations. So heat pumps are critical. They're key technology. They're not going to do everything, but they're going to be a very important part of it. Your question was how to reach those very ambitious goals. And I think the Commission has a lot of work to do, and also the member states. The announcement to double the deployment rate and the ambition to get to those really high numbers is very laudable, but the devil is really in the detail. And just to give you one example where I think European legislation needs an overhaul, in the Renewable Energy Directive, you currently get credits for every unit of renewables that is being used for heating and cooling. But the way the accounting works is that it's the fuel that is being burned that's renewable that counts. So if you burn a lot of biofuel in a very inefficient heating system, you get more credits. A heat pump is highly efficient, but it does not get the same amount of credits. So that it's very technical, it's kind of boring and not something that people want to talk about much, but it's something that is critical because it really provides the framework within which industry delivers heat pumps. And if that framework is built against heat pumps in terms of the incentives, and that's not particularly helpful. So there's lots of opportunities like that to reform existing EU legislation. Another topic that is also being discussed in the UK and other countries a lot is how we tax and energy, and where we put the levies for the transition. Very often we find in our analysis is that there's a carbon price on electricity. We put a lot of the costs of the transition onto electricity prices, but there's nothing on gas, nothing on oil and other fossil fuels, which distorts the market in such a way that often there's no strong economic case, at least until recently when gas prices have gone up so much, to install a heat pump because it's more expensive to run. So that can be, again, reformed quite easily. There are some steps now in the Energy Taxation Directive proposal by the European Commission, but it requires fairly significant reform to make that work. There are some good examples. Denmark, the Netherlands, for example, more recently Germany as well, have already started to reform taxes and levies to encourage electrification of heating, but a lot more work needs to be done. And a lot of that is at member state level as well. It's not just at European level, it's at member state level and national level.
Thanks, Jan. Some very interesting points there. Lucy, you also have some research on energy efficiency measures for protecting households from volatile gas prices. And we also have a graphic of some modeling that you've done that shows the approach being taken in the UK and what is kind of most effective.
Yeah, so I can't see the graphic here, but hopefully everyone watching can see it. So earlier this year, Centre for Net Zero published some detailed modelling. The report is called Hitting the Target, and the code we use for this model is open source, so that's actually available on our GitHub. But it was really striking that Christian said he didn't think there was a heat pump demand problem in Germany, because I would certainly argue the opposite is true in the UK. Jana, I am sure, has more current figures than I do, but I think it's something around 2% of households in the UK currently have a heat pump. Certainly it's a very low percentage compared with some other countries globally. So I would say there certainly is a demand challenge in the UK. The modelling that we did was really designed to answer the question, what interventions might actually help to meet the UK government's target here for installations. Now that target is 600,000 installations per year by 2028. The Climate Change Committee, an independent body in the UK that develops our carbon, what are known as our carbon budgets, has said that probably needs to be closer to 900,000 per year. Now, whichever figure you use, it's a large number. And we modeled a range of different scenarios. Each of the scenarios includes different combinations of possible interventions and also different model parameters. And really just to sort of talk through the headlines, we did find some scenarios in which we forecast that government targets would be met, which is great. We weren't sure if we would do before we started this work, but we did do. And we found some scenarios in which government targets were exceeded. And actually, we thought installations could be closer to that 900,000, that higher of the two figures. We, of course, also found some scenarios in which targets weren't met. But I think some of the important things here, we found that the upfront cost of purchasing and installing the heat pump was a very important factor here. So although the downstream running costs are also relevant, and Jan did talk a little bit about those policy costs, we actually found that the upfront costs were still the biggest barrier here. And maybe if you think about an analogy from the world of transport, there are many people, I'm sure, who are currently using petrol and diesel vehicles who perhaps would like to switch to an electric vehicle because they feel that the fuel costs of running that vehicle would be cheaper, but actually they're still perhaps have a barrier which is affording to purchase the vehicle in the first place. We didn't find any scenarios that met the target or exceeded the target that didn't also include the announcement of a ban on fossil fuel heating systems. Now, the ban that we modeled didn't come in until 2035. So this is a while away in the future. And we modeled two different scenarios. One when the ban was announced 10 years in advance, so giving people plenty of warning that this change was coming, and one in which it was announced only 5 years beforehand. And we found a big difference. The 5-year difference equaled in our model 63% more installations for the earlier announcement. So important point there is that the date that they announced that the ban became effective was unchanged. It was just when it was announced that we looked at. And then to speak to Christian's points, we did find some scenarios in our modeling in which we forecast that there would actually be sufficient demand for heat pump installations, but in some of our scenarios, that demand would actually be effectively kind of constrained by lack of trained heat pump installers. So in those scenarios, we actually forecast, we were able to put a number on it. We forecast that we would need an additional 30,000 trained installers by 2028 to avoid those short to medium term constraints. To put that into context, We have around about 120,000 gas-safe registered engineers in the UK. So we're talking about 1/4 of that workforce being trained in order to be able to install heat pumps. So when you put it in those terms, actually, it really, to me, that looks like a great opportunity, a great kind of green jobs, green skills opportunity there. But you can find all the details of that modeling. It's a very long report that goes through the data we use to set up, initialize, calibrate that model. And you can see all the scenarios and the projections that we had for each of them in the full report on our website.
Thank you, Lucy. I'd just like to kind of direct that back to either Christian or Maryna, as you have a bit of experience with the regulation in Germany. Of what do you think Germany has done differently to make that demand for heat pumps a little bit higher than perhaps markets like the UK?
Yes, I think it's well, like maybe it sounded a little bit too easy when I said we have enough of demand in Germany. Like right now, at this second in this month, I think that's true. But when we look 6 months back, it wasn't true, because it's always a result of the subsidies of gas and electricity prices, and yeah, the offers which the market can make for customers, which heating system they will buy. So I think the government needs to have a very close eye on these topics, and yeah, has to calculate the subsidies and to put measures in place so the gas prices and electricity prices are on a level where the heat pump will be chosen when the customer makes a rational decision at his heating system. And I think when you keep these measures in mind, and we have the agreement to install these 60 million heat pumps in Europe, or 6 million heat pumps in Germany, then the market will follow. That's what we've seen. That's what we have seen in Germany. So 6 months ago, or maybe 9 months ago, gas was cheap, electricity was rather expensive, and the installation and using a heat pump over 20 years was overall a little bit more expensive than just using a gas boiler without any subsidies. So then no one, or just your customers with a very high level of ecological opinion would choose a heat pump in this case. But when the markets changed and gas got more expensive compared to the electricity prices, we saw a very rapid change in these decisions, and that was supported by the subsidies which are given out in Germany for heat pump installations. So you get 25 to 35% of the upfront cost back when you install a heat pump in Germany, and I'm sure that that helped to get this demand which we have right now. But you really have to keep an eye on it so it stays this way, and because it easily switches back, and then the market will switch to gas boilers again.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Christian. Yeah, so subsidies are obviously quite an effective tool there. Jan, are bans another effective tool to increase adoption of heat pumps?
Yeah, thanks for letting me come in on that point. We've seen bans also in other countries, and I think the invasion of Ukraine and the energy crisis has really triggered massive uptake of these regulatory instruments to accelerate the heat pump market. The Netherlands, for example, 2026 is the date there. No standalone fossil fuel heating system will be allowed in any building, whether that's an existing or a new building. Other countries like Norway, Denmark, Finland, Sweden had bans for a long time. I just saw that Austria is now starting to implement bans as well. So we're seeing more and more countries adopting this kind of measure, which seems pretty draconian when you look at it first sight, but when you actually give people time in the industry time, it signals clarity, and I think that's what's needed. I think it goes back to Lucy's point. If you don't have a clear regulatory end date, then you have to rely on subsidies, and that will have some impact, but ultimately it's not going to get you to the scale where you need to get to meet those goals that we have. So I think it's a very important instrument, but we have to also then have some sort of support mechanism, especially for lower income households who may need capital support to actually make the transition. We can't expect everybody to have the capital to do that. But I think ultimately having that clarity will drive down costs as well and scale up the industry. And we're seeing already in Germany, I think it was Fiesmann investing 1 billion euros in a new manufacturing capacity there, and other companies too. So there's lots of things happening as a result of those bans, and I think they have an important place.
Thanks, Jan. And Maryna, you've worked a lot in regulation and energy and gas markets. How do you see this balance of subsidies, incentives, bans? What do you think is important from a regulatory perspective?
I can say regarding hydrogen sector that for development sector, it's important to have clear regulation, and for us, it's the main question. It's requirements for renewable hydrogen according to the Renewable Energy Directive. It's a key issue, and also the second question, it's a hydrogen package that will clarify the main rules for shift from natural gas market to the hydrogen sector. Only on the basis of the clear rules and regulations, investors can plan development of hydrogen sector. But in any case, we see that the main tendency is a development of renewables and hydrogen in order to decarbonize the energy sector.
Thanks, Maryna. And Jan, how can we resolve the conflict of providing short-term relief without sacrificing long-term sustainability goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one we asked ourselves right after the invasion of Ukraine happened in February. And we published some work in March to demonstrate how far Europe could go in the medium term to move away from Russian gas with clean energy technologies, kind of recognizing that this would trigger a move to switch from gas from Russia to other fossil fuels potentially. And the analysis that we produced shows that by 2025, about 2/3 of Russian gas imports could be replaced with clean energy technologies. And by that, I mean energy efficiency, so energy savings, but also renewable energy, specifically wind and solar, and electrification. Those are the key levers that are available to reduce gas demand. And other analysis from the IEA, but also the European Commission itself. And someone mentioned Repower EU before, and the numbers in there corroborate our own findings. So there's huge potential for that. But the problem is that it takes time. And I think that goes to the main point of your question. The long term versus the short term. So it takes time to roll out clean energy technologies. We have bottlenecks with permitting, for example. We have bottlenecks with factory capacity. Key components are not available in many global markets, not just in energy. That has an impact on scalability. Then there's workforce constraints. We don't have enough installers, for example, to put in heat pumps in many countries or to install energy efficiency measures. So scaling up can't be done overnight. And it requires time. So I think that makes it even more important that we have that long-term clarity and certainty so that the market can scale up and deliver, so that investors can have certainty that they will actually get a return on their investment. And the companies that actually have to do this will make the investments and enlarge their capacity to deliver. But yeah, I completely acknowledge there will still need to be some gas and other fossil fuels to replace Russian gas in the short term. And indeed, we already see LNG playing a major role, to some extent, even coal coming back in the short term. And there's some investment in new fossil fuel infrastructure. And some of that is probably needed. But there's also a risk, in my view, that if we overinvest, we might end up with stranded assets in the long term. And how can that be avoided? Well, I think by doing as much as we can in the short and medium term with clean energy. The good news, I think, is that the transition to clean energy actually addresses not just the current energy crisis, but also helps bringing down prices and also helps reducing emissions. and providing insurance against future crises like this happening again. So I think there is a good news story potentially here, but we have to be careful that we do not overinvest in new fossil fuel infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jan. And Lucy, obviously working for the Centre for Net Zero, long-term sustainability goals are key for you. What do you have to add to Jan's points?
Yeah, I think on the point on energy efficiency measures and investments and return on investment, I think insulation is the sort of no-brainer decision in many ways. We're seeing in several countries support for high energy bills, but of course that support of that nature has to continue for as long as those bills remain high. Whereas support towards things like insulating properties, that's a one-off activity which then continues to have a return on investment further down the line. This is particularly important, I think, in places like the UK. I think we have some of the worst insulated or the least energy efficient houses in Western Europe. I heard a stat recently, which I think said the average UK household over 5 hours loses 3 degrees Celsius of heat. So quite an extraordinary number there. Of course, also having better insulated properties makes it easier for people to adopt technologies like heat pumps, for instance. If you have a more energy efficient property that will retain, that will hold heat for longer, then you need a smaller heat pump in order to be able to heat that property. That's a lower cost for you as well. So these things are all linked. In fact, we have something called the Boiler Upgrade Scheme here in the UK, which is a government grant-funded scheme to help householders purchase things like heat pumps. That's actually kind of behind target, if you like. The number of people who have taken advantage of that scheme to purchase some of these things for their houses is behind where we might expect. And I think part of the reason for that is it does place quite high energy efficiency standards on the householder to be able to take advantage of that scheme. So I think we need to look at all of these things as part of a system, but energy efficiency is hugely important. Just as a kind of final thought on that, again, I can't speak for other countries, but certainly here in the UK, there are a number of sources that suggest we have currently around 80% of the buildings that we will have in 2050 are already with us today. So they're already built. So really, we can talk about things like new homes, new building standards and things. Of course, they are important. But just that stat alone really emphasizes that we can't afford to overlook the existing building stock, and that these issues of retrofit are incredibly important.
Thanks, Lucy. We've had a question from the audience from Jack asking, well, more of a kind of remark saying that thermal energy storage seems to be missing from the conversation or initiatives. Lucy, what would you say to that?
Well, I would say I hope it's not. So it's certainly part of some of the conversations we have here. I think it's something we need to pay more attention to in future. And, this links to what I've just been saying, actually, about insulating properties and understanding their kind of energy efficiency. Interestingly, actually, we are just starting some research, which is, I suppose, has some relevance here. Now, we're doing some research with another organisation, Nesta, which is an innovation charity in the UK. And that research is just about to enter its pilot phase. And we will be looking at how heat pumps can be used as a flexibility resource at the household level. But most importantly, what we will be trying to understand is the kind of the real world side of things here. So we will be trying to understand how heat pumps can be used flexibly while maintaining thermal comfort of the householders. And that will require a real kind of detailed understanding of not just the sort of household material properties. So what's the level of insulation? How well does that particular property retain heat? But also those householders' activities. So, are they actually, how often are they home? When they are home, what are they doing? What does that mean for whether they feel thermally comfortable or not? So what we're really trying to do through this research is to understand what's the kind of the actual real world potential for heat pumps to provide flexibility to the system not just the hypothetical technology potential.
Thanks, Lucy. And I mean, that's obviously the very topical kind of thing at the moment of controlling heat pumps and integrating them into the grid and with other assets using their flexibility. And that's something that we at gridX are also heavily involved in. Christian, you obviously have a kind of more technical understanding of heat pumps. They're difficult to control. What do you see as the main challenges of using heat pumps as flexibility assets?
I think at the moment it's mostly a problem of infrastructure and standards maybe in the control of heat pumps and the connected devices as a photovoltaic system or a battery. So I think right now we are in a situation where we can only limited or can install heat pumps only in a limited number. But what we can do to prepare for the following years is to speed up this this digitization and connection of our several devices, which will be at our homes in 2030 and in the following years. So I think what's very important is to speed up the smart meter process, because that will be a critical infrastructure to allow heat pumps to be used as a demand or to provide demand side flexibility. So I'm very interested in the science which Lucy is doing right now to look deeper into it, what it really brings. But from a technical perspective, we have a house which has a very high level of energy storage. You have a lot of water in these houses, and you can easily put this water a little bit warmer or a little bit colder at specific times to use this as a storage. And when we have 6 million heat pumps installed in Germany and combine this and are able to control these in an intelligent way, then I think that will be it's not a nice thing, and it will not only make our systems more efficient, but I think it's crucial for our energy grids. And that's a topic we didn't cover today in detail. But I think without this demand side flexibility of heat pumps and PVs and batteries, we won't be able to provide the electricity for every heat pump. So it's very important to speed up this process of smart meter connection of these devices.
Thanks, Christian. We only have a few minutes left, but Jan, you also wanted to make a comment on large energy thermal storage.
Yeah, just briefly, I think it's an important point, and it's often overlooked because it's so much cheaper to store energy thermally than in batteries at the moment. I think the data shows that it's about 100 times cheaper to store energy in thermal storage than using a battery. I mean, that will change, of course, with battery prices going down, but there's still a big gap. And there are some great projects in district heating in Sweden, in Denmark, in Germany, where solar, for example, energy is used in the summer to heat up very large water tanks, and then that energy is extracted in the winter with the heat pump, upcycled and used in a small district heating network. And there are other projects like that too. And more recently, I saw that there's innovation also with other materials, like heating up sand in large, basically silos, and using that. So there's lots more potential, I think, for thermal storage that we will need if we gonna move to a more variable supply side. And the more of that we can do, the better.
Thanks, Jan. We had another question from the audience from Alec, and he asked, how advanced would you say Belgium is on this topic compared to the rest of Europe? Which quite a specific question, but maybe Jan, you might be able to provide some insights.
Pretty bad, I would say. And I say that for two reasons. One is Belgium has notoriously inefficient buildings. You can see that from heat loss data. Tado, a German the thermostat manufacturer, has produced a map where you can see that Belgium is the second worst after the UK. So really bad. The UK is terrible. So Belgium is almost as bad as the UK when it comes to energy efficiency. in buildings. The second big issue is that the current taxes on energy in Belgium are really poorly designed. So it's really is pushing you towards fossil fuels right now, because running a heat pump on electricity tends to be more expensive, or has been in the past, because electricity prices are very high, because of taxes and levies, and other fuels are a lot cheaper. Again, because of the lack of a fair share of energy taxation. So I think, Belgium is in a pretty difficult place when it comes to that, and also uses a lot of fossil fuels for heating, and hasn't done enough yet. So lots of potential. I think that's another way to look at it.
Thanks, Jan. Now we've basically run out of time, but Maryna, I just wanted to give you the chance to quickly add anything about how we can use hydrogen to complement other systems like heat pumps in the clean energy system.
I think hydrogen can complement industry. So first of all, because it can be used in the industries when we cannot use renewable electricity. But in any case, the main targets of hydrogen also to decrease our dependency from the natural gas that is not climate neutral.
Thanks, Maryna. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but thank you all of you for taking part. Really interesting discussion, lots of interesting topics there. And it actually makes me quite hopeful that we can kind of reach the targets, and that we can work together to decarbonize heating and reduce our reliance on gas. So thank you again, and I hope you have a great afternoon. We'll be back in 2 minutes.